the cloud. Let me
Hi.
hold on for a minute. Let me just mute all and then find our friend Dr. Ken. Where are you, Ken? Ken, okay.
I unmuted myself, John.
Perfect, go for it, Ken.
All right, so I'll start again. Beverly asked a question about what is better, maple syrup, sugar, or honey. And I'm sure she meant what is better for use around the house and all of that. But the irreverent answer to that is it's like asking what's better, cocaine, heroin, or fentanyl. They're all bad for you. So, and I'm not saying never use them, but there's a risk in saying what is better, because once you've said what is better, that better part may convince you to start using more, and more isn't better. So I just have to get that aside. Now, I'll give you an example in a few moments. And in fact, I'll give it to you now. A coworker of my wife decided to stop using wheat and sugar, and now comes to work with sweetened fruit, canned fruit, dates, those puffed rice cakes, those little round styrofoam hockey pucks. And I'm not sure that her choice is better than what she gave up. So she's basically traded off one problem for another, or one poison for another. So the risk there is, by saying something's better, are we baiting and switching, right? So we want to reduce as much of all of those as we can. Now the answer to that is that maple syrup has less calories, less fructose, more minerals than honey. Honey is about 30% glucose, a little bit more towards higher 30% fructose, and has some other complex sugars that are harder to digest, require a little more energy, and are somewhat prebiotic. So they help the bacteria in your gut. And of course, table sugar, we know that's one molecule sucrose, one molecule fructose, and we should all know what that does. Now, I mentioned this to John earlier. There's about, you said 60 names. I've got a list of 40 names for sugar. And I'm wondering if people would like me to read some of those off. You may not have seen these names before. Should we do that, do you think? Part of my reading. So, agave nectarine, blackstrap molasses, cane sugar, confectioner's sugar, date sugar, diastatic malt, Florida crystals, galactose, golden syrup, icing sugar, maltodextrin, muscovado sugar, refiner's syrup, sugar, Barbados sugar, brown sugar, caramel, corn syrup, demerara sugar, diastase, fructose, glucose, grape sugar, invert sugar, maltose, organic raw sugar, rice syrup, treacle, barley malt, buttered syrup, carob syrup, corn solid, syrup solids, dextran, ethyl maltol, fruit juice, glucose solids, high fructose corn syrup, lactose maple syrup, panoka, sorghum syrup, turbinado sugar, beet sugar, cane juice crystals, castor sugar, crystalline fructose, dextrose, evaporated cane juice, fruit juice, golden sugar, honey, malt syrup, molasses, raw sugar, sucrose, yellow sugar, and there's more. So when you look at a label on some food products, processed food products, you'll see more than one of these. So basically, when you look at the sugar, and then you see some of these other things, and they're further down the list. You're getting sugar, and then a couple things, and then some more sugar, and then a couple more things, and then some more sugar. So that's where they sneak it into your food. So we've got to remember that. That's all I have on that. Do you have anything, Ron?
Yeah, you know, we talk and we use the word food, and I guess I want to just explain what food is. If it's in the grocery store, that doesn't necessarily mean it's food. And like we were talking last week, and John had talked about, we want to stay away from those middle aisles and shop the outside perimeter. If it's grown in the ground, if it's raised organically, then we're talking food. But if it's packaged and processed and altered from the way God created things, we better take a look. And I think what most people don't do is they look for substitutes rather than look for real foods. So we're making excuses to take care of one big thing that seems to be the enemy, the sugar, but we don't look at all those other things that you just listed off, and they're enormous. Now, another thing I'll just say about honey too, there's a lot of honeys on the grocery store shelf. If you look at all the honey out there, most of those are not honey. The only honey we get is raw, unfiltered honey, and you want to get it grown locally so that you're getting all the pollen that you're accustomed to in your region, because if not, it could be an allergen to you. But then again, we don't want to use it to add on to something just to sweeten things. Things by nature that are sweet, like fruit, have all the sugar we need. We don't need to add sugar too. So I think we got to really watch how much we use of it. Not that we don't, we do. We make granola, and we use for about a 2 quart of granola total, we use 1/4 of a cup of pure maple syrup. So there again, it's pure maple syrup, it's nothing but, and there are some benefits in there. They're minimal, but there are nutritional factors in there where there are none in table sugar. And in most of the things that John listed off, there's nothing in there. It's processed, it's dead, it's poison to your body. So honey, even a little bit better than the maple syrup. Quite a few actual, in fact, it's antibacterial and antifungal. So, but again, that's not an excuse to just go hog wild and use lots of it because it's better than sugar.
That's great. Yeah. And it reminded me of what Michael Pollan used the term. He called some of those things food-like substances. The center of the grocery store is full of food-like substances. They look like food, but they're not really food. And I think one of the other things, you may know more about that than I do, Ron, but a diet too rich in sugar kind of numbs out the taste buds, and you lose the taste for sugar, and you can't tell how much you're getting. Exactly.
That's such a good point. There was a time quite a few years ago when I got off sugar completely. I mean, totally. No cookies, nothing, for a long period of time. And then I went to a birthday party and I had a piece of cake. And I'll tell you, that hit me like a sledgehammer over the head in terms of what it did for me negatively, that caused headaches, nausea. And you know, the sad thing is, I think most people do that so consistently and they feel bad so consistently, they think that's normal. And once we introduce good foods to people or good food supplements to people, they start to feel better, and then they realize, you know, maybe their body's really improving. So I think what we really have to do is address what we're eating. And I think it sounds so simple, but it's very, very difficult.
Yeah, my wife is wired perfectly for that. She can look at certain foods and the things that might tempt the rest of it, but when she looks at it, she connects that with how she's going to feel after she ate it, and she says, no, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, very good.
Yeah, I just had that. We had a little get-together with our son and daughter-in-law last Saturday night, and she said, would you like some of this dessert? And I said no, and so she provided for me some fruit and along with the coffee, and that was really, really good. But there was another night not too long ago where I accepted it, and it was this frozen ice cream kind of thing, dessert, and I felt lousy. My nose plugged up. I didn't sleep well that night because all that was doing is agitating my body. And I think if you're doing that on a regular basis, you just feel crummy all the time. You really don't notice it. But when you get off that and then you put it and reintroduce it again, boy, it really hits you hard. And I think that's good, because it should be, if we're awake and have knowledge, get us thinking on the right track. And we got to get people, I think that's the most important thing any nutritional company, including iGalen, can do, is to teach people to critically think about what they're putting in their bodies.
Yes. And I would add to that when you eat that ice cream and feel terrible and your nose plugs up, how many people go to the drugstore to get something for it?
Yeah.
So
Exactly.
they're just buying a shovel to dig themselves deeper. So a second question that I got was, how do I talk to my doctor about iGalen products? And I'm sure you've had that. I've had that. Dr. Gluckman introduced me to iGalen. I tried to talk to my physician about it and failed miserably. And so I don't know. I don't know. I can give some perspective on it. when I brought in a fact sheet on Amulin, the first thing that and this will go to another question that we can talk about, first thing that my physician said is this one of those pyramid scheme things? And I said, well, it's sold multi-level. And he said, I went to one of those things and everybody was jumping around and yelling and dancing. They were all crazy, you know, it was like they were all on cocaine. And it was, you know, they had somebody, and it was a product called, anyway, it was a very, you know, it just turned him totally off. And so from that moment on, he painted everything that came through his door with the same brush. And that's one of the problems. Now, I'm sure you're the same, Ron. I've had 40 years of receiving people bringing in back to cassette tapes and then CDs and brochures and all of that stuff. What I ask them and I don't turn anybody away, I want to know, because there's good things out there. Had I turned John Gluckman away, I would be limping after I cycled to work yesterday, and I'm not, right? It's done marvelous things. So I say, bring me the science. I'd like to know what it's supposed to do. I'd like to see some research backing that up. I'd like to know the exact ingredients. I don't want to know how a tumor fell off somebody's butt in Topeka, Kansas. Who knows, right? I don't want to see magazines full of pictures of shiny cars and straight teeth and beautiful accessories from wealthy people, because my oath is to the patient. My oath isn't to my banker. And so that's where I start. And very few products have gone through that filter. Galen has got through with both of their products. What do you think about that one, Ron?
Ken, you're exactly right. I've experienced the very same thing. People will come in and I'm recommending nutritional products and have been for many, many years. And they'll say, oh, you're really into this. You would really appreciate this product. And then they start to list, like you say, all the symptoms that it's taken care of and how great it is and it tastes wonderful. And I said, well, let me see the ingredient list. And well, let me send you to their website. So I go to their website, and some of them you can search and search, and I know how to get around the web pretty good. And you cannot find the ingredients.
Yeah.
So right off the hop, that's a turn down for me. And I think the same is true with every doctor out there today. They want science. And medical doctors, I think that's the hardest one to break into, period, because they don't have the background and the training that you or I have, or Dr. Gluckman has, in the field of nutrition. So when you approach them, you're challenging them.
Yes.
And they don't like to be challenged because they are on the high rung of the ladder. They are next to God and maybe even a little higher than God in terms of knowing what's happening in the body. So I personally don't go after them. If I have a conversation with a doctor and I may be talking about my own personal health and what I've experienced with a product and how it's got the science, and we have 2 Nobel Prize nominees that have all the science and background and years of study behind these products, and here is how it works in the body, then you might get their attention a little bit. But again, you know, they don't have that nutritional background, because if you ask the doctor what to eat, the medical allopathic doctor, they don't know what to tell you to eat. They read the drug labels and they'll tell you, oh, if it's got this in it, then it's going to interfere with this med that we're taking, so don't use that supplement or that food. But they're not, they're all about treating the symptoms, treating the disease, where what we should really be about is informing people how to gain optimum health. And that's the bottom line. And I think Jana posted something beautiful in the Facebook group today that really grabbed my attention. We are abusing our doctors with all these questions about all these diseases within the body, where if you think about our 2 products, Amulin does what? It's a patented carbohydrate manager. Well, then the question is, why should I want to manage my carbohydrates? That's the question that people need to ask themselves. If they're having symptoms that are because of high carbohydrate ingestion, and they name it in the medical community as diabetes, well then why do I have diabetes? That's where we have to get people to start to think. We've got to empower people to be self-educated when it comes to their health, because they're not going to get it from the allopathic doctors out there, sadly, not yet. And I learned that a quarter of a century ago, and the doctor was training, he said, we're 20 years ahead of things back then. Well, we haven't got anywhere near caught up in that 20 years. We're still way ahead of the medical allopathic field, because they're looking at doing one thing: keeping you as their patient by treating and managing your symptom, not building your health to get rid of the drugs that cause the side effects that keep you taking more and more drugs. It's a vicious cycle. We've got to get off it.
Exactly. And one of the things that I think that happens is people get baffled by Latin. So you get these big Latin names, and they think, oh my God, I need something for this big Latin name. I had an actual case where a patient came in and asked if I could treat celopalgia. And I said, celopalgia, oh, cephalalgia. You've got cephalalgia. And I said, how did you find out you had cephalalgia? And she said, well, I've been having these headaches for a long time, and I went to my doctor and asked him what was the matter. And he looked at me, and he kind of walked around, and he didn't touch me, but he said, I have cephalalgia. And I said, well, you went in with English headaches and you came out with Latin headaches, because cephalalgia is headache in Latin. I just scanned Jana's page and was looking down at some of the questions that people asked. I don't know what PCOs are. That's an abbreviation. I don't know. Somebody's asking about that. Climax for kidney transplant, reflux and sinus allergies, cystic acne, dish. Well, no, I wrote a few down myself. How about that hypertrophic pulmonary osteoarthropathy, or I have DISH, something called diffuse idiopathic skeletal hyperostosis. That's a nice big word for you. The Emulin's doing wonderful with that. Hyperalgic glutosis, that's a sore butt from sitting too long at the computer. We used to make up our own words. Ocular rectitis, which is a crappy outlook on life. Umbilitis, from putting salt in your navel when you eat celery in bed. So I don't mean to make really light of these things, but there's a million diagnoses out there. And for that million diagnoses, there's very few causes of these illness. And most of it is processed food. 80% of it's processed food. And for those million many diagnoses, there's many drugs to treat that symptom, or to try to stop that effect. And so what we are doing is promoting something that brings you back to health. There's a chiropractor by the name of James Chestnut, who does brilliant lectures. And one of the things that he does in his lectures is he turns the lights off. And you sit there in darkness. And he says, this is disease. Disease is like darkness. And I think Dr. Regen speaks of that as well. How do you get rid of darkness? There's only one way. You have to add light. So how do you get rid of disease? If disease is darkness, you have to add health. Everything you do to improve your health when you have a diagnosis is going to fight that disease. Your body knows what to do. So we could give all of those people asking those questions the same answer. There's one answer.
Hey, Ken, you
yes.
Have, 2 people on chat volunteer what PCOS is.
Yeah.
Oh, ovarian syndrome. Yeah. Okay. Well, obviously, that's obvious.
Yeah, and theoretically, this our Emulin is amazing for that, because one of the things that they use for it is metformin, which you wouldn't make that connection because metformin is a diabetes drug, but they use that in PCOS. So it would be, it would make sense that you could replace that with our Emulin and be a lot better off.
Of course. And for my money, and I don't know whether you agree, Ron, you can get into it. It is all about the liver, and the liver gets packed up with triglycerides from all the sugar that you can't manage, and your chemistry goes to hell in a handbasket, and what disease you get is anybody's guess.
Yeah, and then you start taking these medications to counteract that symptom, and your liver gets more burdened yet.
Yeah.
So you go from bad to worse. And I remember a gentleman come into my office one time. He was about the age I am now, mid-70s, and he was having some heart issues and high blood pressure and a host of other issues. And I said, well, when you come, please bring in a list of all your medications. I'd just like to see what you're taking. So he came in and he put this grocery sack on my desktop, and he had 17 meds he was taking. I said, well, his name was John. I said, John, what did you start out with? And he looked at his wife. He says, well, I think it was for high blood pressure, right? Yeah, I think it was. And then I had a side effect from that. So then they put me on this other medication to counteract the side effect of this medication. And he just went through this progressive cascade downward to where I said, boy, with all those meds, John, you've got to be feeling fantastic. He says, oh, I feel like crap. I says, well, let me ask you a little bit about your diet. So we got talking about that because that's where I'm always going to go. And I said, well, you have butter or margarine? So, my doctors tell us we should always have margarine because I've got high cholesterol and I'm taking Lipitor. I said, well, John, let me ask you a question. You're a smart man. You got some age and wisdom there. Who made margarine and who made butter? He said, well, God made cows, so I think God made butter, right? I said, right. He says, see, Martha, I told you. So, but those are the kind of awakenings that people need to have. And I think what we can do as Igalan distributors is to just get people to think. And we got to use those kind of stories to tell. Stories sell. We can talk about all the ingredients, and we can talk about how that affects this pathway and that pathway, and that's all good. And I'm going to leave that to Dr. Rajan, Dr. Stefano, and Dr. Ahrens. But I'm going to talk about how do we build health. And if we do that, we're going to have a lot of success. But if we start getting into how do we treat this symptom, and we start claiming those things, Igalan's not going to be around very long because that's against the law.
Yep.
And one of the things that I think is I'm always of the belief that we should walk the talk. And I think anybody using and selling Igalan, promoting Igalan should be walking the talk. There's a double benefit. People are going to say, look at you and say, I want a little bit of that. You look like you feel really good. And they're also going to realize that you're doing that yourself. On the pharmaceutical end, Debbie, you've got a background in that, but I was in a nutrition course with a pharmacist, and he mentioned that once people get over about 7 medications, they have no idea what's going to happen.
No. And the thing about it is, it's all like you said earlier, it's symptom suppression. It's like putting a Band-Aid on when the oil light comes on in your car, because, okay, now I feel better because I don't have to see that warning sign. So we're taking our warning signs and we're stuffing them down and letting the underlying problem continue to get worse. That's why when I started to wake up a little bit, I realized that this, pharmacy definitely went where I wanted to be. Let's look at the underlying cause. And when it comes to describing what Emulin does, I use the sugar chaperone description, because then you don't have to get into all the, like you said, all the pathways. But I tell people it acts like a sugar chaperone, and then I say, what does a chaperone do? A chaperone rides herd on something that could cause a problem if left unattended, right? So glucose without chaperones damages tissue. It damages the pancreas and every other tissue, the blood supply to every tissue, therefore every tissue is involved. So the sugar chaperone can really simplify it, that terminology, and I find people go, oh, that makes sense.
That's a terrific definition. I hadn't heard anybody use it in that way. Debbie, can you repeat it again? The rights heard on, go ahead.
Well, I just ask them what a chaperone does. And sometimes they know, sometimes they don't. But I say a chaperone is something or somebody who rides herd on somebody who's, could potentially be a problem. So when we had dances in high school, when we were still young, we had to have adult chaperones, right? So we don't leave the dance and go run off with our boyfriends or something like that. But, chaperones in all kinds of different ways. When a person, a prisoner is being transported to another facility. They don't say, get in this taxi and go to that other jail and sign yourself in, right? You've got to be chaperoned. So I just find that's the most visual representation of what amylin is doing in the body to our sugars, to our glucose. It's just keeping track of it and riding herd on it. Otherwise, it's already a poison, but too much of it is going to be a worse poison.
Well, it's very good.
Another question, and one that you posted in the thing, and I'm going to step off into the deep end here when I talk this, potentially, is the pyramid scheme work. And that's one thing that my physician came back to me with. And I thought I should educate myself about this, right? If I'm going to be accused of participating in one of these, I should know what it is. So I Wikipedia'd pyramid scheme. A business model that recruits members via a promise of payments or services for enrolling others into a scheme rather than supplying investments or sale of products or services. As recruiting multiplies, recruiting quickly becomes impossible as most members are unable to profit. Often unsustainable and illegal, some, in capitals, multi-level marketing plans have been classified this way. So I don't want to get in hot water, but here's what I think about iGalen. It offers people the opportunity to acquire an account for $29.95 US. I hope I got the number right. It enables individuals to purchase directly from the company. They can purchase at a discount for their own use, family use, or retail. As in any wholesale retail business, there's an increased discount for larger volume purchases. Distributors receive a benefit from introducing others to the product, whether it is markup on retail sales or a percentage of downline sales. This is little different to me from the manufacturer, wholesaler, jobber, retailer relationship that we all deal with every day in other stores. I'm going to give you an example of a few other schemes, and I'm going to ask you whether they're pyramids or not. Can you name this scheme? The government forces everyone to contribute money to a plan. They manage those funds and distribute them to people over a certain age. If the plan succeeds until the demographics changes and younger contributors have to pay more and more and can expect less and less, and that pyramid collapses. Now that one's called Social Security. Ron, in the US, you're in the thick of it, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm benefiting sort of from it.
Yeah. There's another one. The government collects funds from everyone according to their ability to pay, then disperses the funds to pay for medical care for those who become sick. People who maintain a healthy lifestyle subsidize those who don't, many of whom don't or can't contribute to the system are subsidized by those both who can and those who stay healthy. As people get sicker and sicker, they weigh that system down, and we're only a few years from collapse of the healthcare system as well. And I would remind people that for every dollar spent on processed food, we spend $3 on treating the diseases they cause. So it's not good economics. So individually, we need to straighten that out. We can't wait for government or legislation, any of that. We just need to straighten it out ourselves in our own kitchens. How's that for you, Ron?
That sounds pretty right. Yeah, I think, we've got to change the way people think about how they take care of themselves, because one way or another, you're going to pay money. I mean, ultimately, you don't get through this life without putting money out for something. Now, I can choose to put money out for good supplements, eating whole foods, or I can just eat the way my body would maybe wanna, or I've been told to eat by all the commercials on TV, and then take all the drugs. And one way or another, I'm going to pay. Now, I like the way I'm doing it right now, because today I had the opportunity to run into an old neighbor, younger than I am, but she was from the neighborhood. She lived across the street. Her husband since passed away. He had Alzheimer's, and she's just retired a couple of years ago from teaching. And she looked at me and she says, "You haven't changed a bit. You still look as youthful as you did back when we lived on the neighborhood." And I said, "Thank you, Mary. I really appreciate that." And I said, "You look good yourself." She said, "Well, my hair is not brown anymore. It's kind of white." But it was obvious, and we get this all the time, and I don't mean to say this boastfully because that's not the case. But we have that all the time, because we are walking, living testaments of what we've been doing for over 30 years. So you get what you pay for. Now, one commercial, and maybe I've said this on another call, but I love it, and it was for Fram oil filters. And then this guy says, well, you can pay me now, and that filter costs more than the one from whatever, or you can pay me later. And there was a picture of a car coming in on the tow truck that it needed an engine overhaul. So one way or another, you're going to pay. Now, I choose to have optimum health, to live out a healthy, productive life, to look way younger than what I am chronologically, and have the energy to go about life and do life with my wife, my kids, my grandkids, my great-grandkids. That's where I choose to spend my money, and I think we need to just help people to get that concept, and that's not easy. I've been trying to do that for many, many years, but they're so bombarded by the commercials all the time, 24/7 on television. The food, the drugs, the food, the drugs. That's basically what it's all about.
I'll often ask patients about, do you have an RSP, or in Canada, Registered Retirement Savings Plan? And then I will say, do you have an RHSP, a Registered Health Savings Plan? So how many people have lots of money in the bank? I see them all the time, and their health is in the tank, and they would give any of that money to have some more health. They've kind of spent it. The other analogy that I use is that going for a triple ice cream cone is a little like borrowing money on your credit card. You get to pay back later with interest. And that adds up. And, you know, thank God for Climax, because I tell you what, that stuff, raising dopamine levels, the cravings are almost gone. And so we've got two great products there.
Guys, can I just
yes.
jump into the pyramids question? We have a chat response from Sandy. Let me just read what she says. My reply to that is, what company are you in? What position do you have? Do you make as much as someone just starting? Do you make what your supervisor makes? Does he make what the store manager does? Does he make the same as his boss up the ladder? And the answer obviously is no to all of those. Well, then you're in a pyramid. And so, you know, listen, the word pyramid for years and years was misconstrued for hierarchy, just a structure. You know, people immediately look at, when you draw circles on the board, immediately they think, oh my God, it's a structure that's called a pyramid or looks like a pyramid. Well, by that representation, the Pope at the top of his pyramid and all his bishops and then all the people under them, and then you, the sinner, that's a classic pyramid. And the president and all his senators and whatever, all of those are they're just structures drawn on paper that looks like a hierarchy. You cannot have organization in life without some kind of a structure. Now, to me, network marketing is simply a distribution channel. You either have brick and mortar, you have mail order, you have buying online at Amazon, or you have distribution by people who get a piece of that action. Because listen, Amazon has affiliate programs. Every major company today has affiliate program. By that definition, they're all pyramids as well. So if anybody challenges you on that, just say, listen, when you understand what a real pyramid is and you want to have a cogent conversation, I'm open to it. But until such time, why don't you try this product? It might help you.
I think a classic example too is what we have here in the United States and around the world. General Motors is the classic pyramid. You got the corporate thing, and then you've got the distributors, you've got the right down to the local retailer. Everybody gets a cut. It's the same deal. Yeah. So yeah, we're a pyramid, just like General Motors is.
Well,
I like to think of Galen as an organism. I was thinking about it, and I see it as kind of a tree. Dr. Rajan, Mr. Fai, Dr. Ahrens, Dr. Scolio, they're the roots. That's where the goodness comes from, and it flows upwards. Jana and Dory and John and those early adopters are like the trunk. They worked very hard and they were very strong and grew the organization. And then the branches get smaller. I'm a twig. And we're all leaves because we all use the product and we benefit from the product. And the money that we pay for the product flows back down and nourishes the roots to grow more and better products. So it's a perfect organism for me.
That sounds great. Any other major questions that you guys want the doctors to handle in the next 5 minutes or so? Because we're already at 38 minutes and we want to stop at around 45. Anybody else have an interesting question?
John, I just wanted to say, when people ask me, is this one of those pyramid things? My first answer is, well, no, pyramids are illegal.
Right.
And I just wait for a minute, and they go, their eyes are kind of looking around like, so do you think I would participate in something illegal? I'm giving you an opportunity to purchase directly wholesale from a company instead of going through a retail outlet.
Right.
And typically the guy at the top of a pyramid makes all the money, and in this company, everybody is at the top of their own pyramid.
Well, it's interesting, Debbie, you mentioned that because I live here in Holland, Michigan, 35 miles from Amway, who had a big lawsuit with Canada back in the day. That got settled. It is not a pyramid. End of story.
Oh. So Amway is not a pyramid?
No, it's not.
Well, no. I mean, I wouldn't expect it was. But, like, pyramids are, I always say a pyramid is something where you're being asked for money, but you don't necessarily always have a product.
Exactly.
Right? Like these chain letters, that's a pyramid. That's an illegal. So I just say, no, it's illegal. And then that kind of sets people back a bit because they never expect that answer. I said, well, no, because it's illegal. I wouldn't do an illegal operation.
I have a picture of the 1980s food pyramid, and you want to talk about a pyramid scheme. That was the result of lobbying from food companies, arm twisting of politicians, et cetera, et cetera. Many people gained from that. The people who didn't gain from that were the people that obeyed it or used that pyramid to. The base of that pyramid was grains and starches and all of that stuff, the one food group that we don't actually need to eat. And that 80s food pyramid is responsible for a lot of what we're seeing today in the hospitals.
Exactly.
And that was just pure politics.
Yeah, well, what I normally say when they ask about a pyramid scheme is, no, are you looking for one? If so, sorry, I can't help you.
That's good.
Usually shuts them up really quick.
Try
Because
Egypt.
99% of them don't even know what a pyramid really is.
Hey, Cheryl.
So,
Hey,
Cheryl Ann, yeah.
How are you? I haven't seen you for so long. How are you feeling?
I'm getting there. I've been quite unwell, as you probably heard.
I know, that's why I'm asking.
And been working closely with Jackie and Stephen and Dr. Regine to try and get everything sorted and settled. I've just started the Climax 4 days ago, and yeah, it massively into detox.
Oh, good.
But hopefully a few more days I'll be feeling a bit brighter on that. But we finally got the Emulin where it needs to be.
Oh, good. Good to see you. Yeah. All right.
Yeah, no, I was doing really well on the C, and then when I changed to E, I wasn't taking enough.
Yeah.
So,
all right. Who else has a question? We only got another 3-4 minutes.
I have a question that I typed in at another meeting that probably wasn't
Let's see.
pertinent.
What was it?
Regarding the source of algae in Lake Klamath.
Uh-huh.
What are the odds of nature taking care of that source or a competitor just poisoning the water? Is there another source of volcanic ash-fed algae anywhere?
I don't know how to answer that. If you're into conspiracy theories, there's always a chance that terrorists could do that. But you know, what's interesting about Klamath Lake is it's very isolated, and that there are only 4 companies that have a license to harvest the specific algae from that lake on a yearly basis. And obviously, we through I. Galen and Dr. Scolio are one of those companies. two of the major competitors that had a license, one of them has filed for bankruptcy. The other one's not doing so well. So we have the possibility of harvesting the largest chunk of that going forward.
So there are two other companies that are licensed to
There were four licenses in all, and one of the companies that had a license has gone bankrupt. I don't know what they've done with their license at this point, but still, there's so much of that stuff to be harvested.
But they're not making anything like Climax.
Well, they had a product called STEM Tech that had other products, and you can just Google STEM Tech and you'll find what they were doing. It's not exactly like ours. They might have some similar characteristics, but Dr. Stefano knew those people really well, and he claims that he's the one that has the expertise and the formulations and the patents, and so we're lucky that we're going with him.
Ah, very good. Thank you.
Okay. Debbie, one of the companies was Cerule, Cerule, and then STEMTech, and of course us, and I don't know the fourth. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay.
It might be Celtech, John. I was involved with that in the early 90s.
Yeah, but I don't know if it was STEMTech. STEMTech was specific. They were literally on site because I actually visited their offices in California, so I knew their story. Any other questions before we wind up? Well, listen, you guys, we've had a great call. Very, very interesting conversation. The doctors are always providing some very interesting information. I hope you're enjoying the calls, and let's get some more of your teammates and guests onto future calls. Tonight we did something different. We recorded on the cloud, and as per Debbie Ward, that's going to give me a URL so I can post it directly on Facebook as a URL, and you'll be able to reshare that without people having to go into Facebook. So that's a good thing. And it's the first day of the second year. We have the Filipino grand opening in 3 days on Saturday, and then in 2 weeks in Vancouver, Dr. Scolio will be here, and then 2 days later in Calgary. Debbie, did you figure out, are there any more tickets anywhere for those two events?
I put out a few feelers, and it is a sold-out event, but I had someone said they had a couple of tickets because I was looking for two specifically. As far as anybody, with any more, I haven't heard any more feedback from me. I'm not saying thanks, that's what I was looking for, because I want people, if they, somebody might have bought up a block of 20 tickets and don't really have people fill the seats.
Okay.
So I would like people to come forward if they do have extra tickets, because there's single people now that are trying to go on and say, I'd like to go, and it's sold out. So it's kind of a shame.
Okay.
It's a venue of 150 people. So
Calgary.
The Calgary one, yeah. I think Vancouver is sold out as well. I don't know how many it held.
All right. Well, we'll figure that out. Hey guys, thanks again. And I'm going to stop the recording. You guys can hang around and keep talking, but I'm just stopping the recording.